In this video, we're going to take a look at how to use blend modes to control how layers interact with one another. But keep in mind, blend modes aren't limited to layers. They can be used with many of the painting tools, when adding layer effects like drop shadows, and even with the apply image and the calculation commands. So in this document, I have two layers. I have an image of the sky, which is the background layer, and I'll call that the base color, but of course it could be made up of several different layers. And then I have this image of the leaf on a white background, the blend color, the colors that Photoshop is going to be applying when it applies the blend mode, and it's going to give us the result that we see on screen. I'm going to increase the opacity to 100% and just point out that this leaf layer also has three swatches in it, one of which is 100% white, another which is 50% gray, and one which is black, because some of these blend modes have what are called neutral colors, and either white or gray or black will disappear completely. All right, I'm going to leave the opacity up at 100%, and we're going to look at the first blend mode, which is dissolve. Now, technically, it doesn't look like anything's happening, but when I move the opacity down, Photoshop is selecting either a color from the leaf layer or from the background layer. So I guess technically this isn't really blending either. It's picking one or the other in order to create this speckled effect. So let's go ahead and move the opacity for the leaf layer back up to 100% and look at the other blend modes, because I think there are a lot of other blend modes that are more commonly used. So this second set of blend modes, they're all going to have a stronger effect as the blend color, meaning the leaf layer, becomes darker. And as I preview them, you can see that in fact, they all do result in a darker image. Now the blend modes in this group have what's called a neutral color of white, and we can see that that white swatch disappears when I select any of these. Multiply is definitely the most common of the blend mode, and it multiplies the base color with the blend color. All right, the third group of blend modes, they are basically the inverse of the previous group of blend modes, and they all have a stronger effect as the blend color becomes lighter. So the blend modes in this group have what's called a neutral color of black, meaning that the black is going to disappear with all of these layers, and we can just see straight through to that layer in the background. Now, screen is the most popular of the group, and it's like multiply, except that it's multiplying the inverse of the blend and the base color. Now, the fourth group of blend modes, they are all going to add contrast to an image because they lighten when using colors brighter than 50%, and they darken when using colors darker than 50% gray. And overlay and soft light are definitely the two most commonly used blend modes in this group. They have a neutral color of gray, so 50% gray will disappear when you select any of these blend modes. When I select overlay, you'll notice there's a lot of contrast being added, and that's because blend mode multiplies those colors that are darker than 50% and screens those colors that are lighter than 50%, whereas soft light is much more subtle, and it's just using a gamma adjustment to darken or lighten. So as a result, it's actually quite a mild, low contrast blend mode. Both overlay and soft light are commonly used to apply textures when compositing images together, just to help blend the edges and unify images with different amounts of noise or grain. Now the fifth group of blend mode, difference, exclusion, subtract, and divide, while they're unique and they have scientific applications as well as creative applications, they really aren't used very often. So let's scoot to the sixth group of blend modes. Hue, saturation, color, and luminosity. Here, the two most common would be color, because color is going to preserve the gray levels from the base layer and just keep the hue and saturation of the topmost layer. In this case, we're seeing the orange of the leaf layer, while we can still see the grayscale values from the layer below. If I switch to luminosity, now I'm just seeing the luminosity of the leaf layer, basically the inverse of the color mode, and I'm seeing the colors from the layer below. Now, each of these blend modes has a live preview as I roll over them, but if you prefer to use a keyboard shortcut, you can select the Move tool and then use Shift plus to move down through the different blend modes, or use Shift minus to move back up through the blend modes. Now, before we wrap up, I just want to take a look at these two additional examples. I made these documents and you can find them in the exercise files. The first one shows the different blend modes when using two black and white gradients, which I personally found helpful to pre-visualize the effects of the blend modes. So the two small squares on the left, those are going to be your top layer and your base layer, and this is the resulting layer. Say, for example, in normal blend mode, we just see the top layer. Normal blend mode set to 50%, well, then we see 50% of the top and the bottom layer. Then as I move to dissolve to 100%, we only see the top, but then we see that stippling when I move the dissolve to 50%. So you can go ahead and go through these. I've also got a layer here that will just point out the popular ones. So if you just want to look and see how multiply or screen or overlay or soft light affect gradients when they're blended together, feel free to do so. And then I have another document that you can access. In this case, I've got the leaf layer and the sky layer, and just an example of each one of those, again with another layer that will help you to look at just the most popular blend modes. So we'll discuss additional uses for blend modes as we move through the course, but for now there's a quick overview of the power of blend modes in Photoshop.